Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the Secretary of Defense, the Honorable Leon Panetta, the Vice Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Admiral James Winnifield, the Director of Administration and Management, Michael Rhodes, and the founder of the New York Says Thank You Foundation, Jeff Parnas. Ladies and gentlemen, Master Sergeant Jonathan Deutsch with the U.S. Army Chorus will now sing the national anthem. Following the national anthem, the United States Army Chief of Chaplains, Major General Donald Rutherford, will deliver the invocation.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
And let us pray. Almighty God, you are the ruler of the nations and the one who decrees the course of history. As we reflect upon September 11th, 2001, and the years since, we are truly thankful for your amazing grace to our nation. You've been faithful to America from the time of her inception to today. Your holy presence was here 10 years ago, and you are with us here today. For this, we are truly grateful. We pray today for the families and friends of those who perished in this building. Though a decade has passed, the wounds and emptiness are still real and among us. You give us all your strength and comfort on this anniversary. We thank you for the heroic work of those who answered the call to help that day. The response was an invigorating light in a moment of darkness. They gave strength to a watching nation in shock and disbelief. We are grateful for our national and military leaders then and now. May you continue to enable them to guide America, the challenges that lie ahead. We pray for our nation. Grant us courage in the face of adversity, strength in time of trial, and wisdom in times of complexity. Build in us the faith that leads to you to look back to September 11th, 2001. May you take that searing day of 10 years ago and use it to continue to forge the great American character. Be with us in this hour as we honor the people and events of 9/11. Grant that we pay fitting tribute to them, and we remember them through the eyes of faith in you, the ruler of the nation and of history. This we come before you and pray today in your holy name. Amen.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Director of Administration and Management, Mr. Michael Rhodes.
Well, on behalf of Secretary Panetta and Admiral Winnifield, welcome. Thank you for joining us here today. Especially want to thank the Master Sergeant for that wonderful rendition of the national anthem and the chaplain for the stirring invocation. It makes this a special observance today. Especially want to thank Mr. Parnas for joining us here today. Sir, thank you for bringing the Foundation's National 9/11 Flag Tour here and allowing the Pentagon family to be able to join in this important element of healing. I don't think that I'm the only one, but I can't believe that it's been 10 years. It seems like such a short time, and it seems like such a long time all at once, all that's transpired. No one could predict the extent of the horrible terrorist acts that occurred that day, nor what has transpired since. However, in spite of that, together we stand. Together we're strong. We stand together to remember those we lost. They were brothers and sisters, they were mothers and fathers, they were friends, and they were co-workers. We'll never forget them. We stand together to reflect on the events that have transpired, on the progress we've made. We stand together to heal. And we stand together to renew our commitment to one another, to this family, our commitment to this wonderful institution, and our commitment to this nation. We're privileged today to have the 23rd Secretary of Defense join us with remarks, a man who has spent his life serving, spent his life committed to the public service, and who agreed when the President asked to lead this institution. We'll also hear remarks from our recent new Vice Chairman, Admiral Winfield, and looking forward to that. Today, we do gather as a family. This Pentagon is a symbol. It's a symbol of strength. We represent it. It represents us. At the end of the fourth corridor, now restored 1 year after the attacks in the Phoenix Project, we have a chapel that was rebuilt. Seemed appropriate. Just outside that window, we have the Pentagon Memorial, which was dedicated almost 3 years ago today. It honors the lives we lost, provides a place of serenity in a time of craziness to allow us to reflect. We'll never forget. We'll always continue to move forward. We'll always be committed, and we will do that together. So again, thank you for joining us today during this observance, and it's now my privilege to introduce to you our 9th Vice Chairman of the Joint Chiefs, a sailor who has, like many leaders, led at all levels in the Navy and in the Department of Defense. He led in Operation Enduring Freedom and Operation Iraqi Freedom. Most recently was the commander of the U.S. Northern Command in NORAD, and now serving as our 9th Vice Chairman, Admiral James Winfield. Sir.
Mr. Secretary, thank you, sir, for being here, and thank you, Mike, and thank you all for joining us on this afternoon of uncertain weather. As I look out, I see a huge number of friends and colleagues, many of whom have held key leadership roles during the travails that our nation has been through and the struggles that we have conducted in order to preserve our freedom over the last 10 years since that awful event. People like General Ray Odierno, General Norty Schwartz, and a whole host of others that I spot in the audience, as well as a whole host of people who have been on the battlefield for this nation over the last 10 years in this very important struggle that we've undertaken. Thank you all for what you've done, and thank you for being here today. And let me also thank Mr. Jeff Parness, who is with us on the podium, who's the founder and executive director of the New York Says Thank You Foundation, and I'd like to also thank all of his colleagues from the foundation who have done such extraordinary work to bring this remarkable flag to us today. Jeff, thank you. Jeff, what you and your team have accomplished is truly an amazing story. It's not just your grassroots volunteer efforts to rebuild and restore communities in the aftermath of tragedy, but in the national 911 flag here before us and the events that it represents. This weekend, Americans all around the world will pause to remember the tragedy that took place 10 years ago in New York City, in Shanksville, Pennsylvania, and right here at the Pentagon. Yet from the carnage of that day, a new story, an American story, has emerged. In the aftermath of 9/11, steel from our World Trade Center was dispersed across our great country to serve as lasting memorials in places like the Dixon Fire Department in Northern California, where a piece of steel sits as part of their 9/11 memorial, and in upstate New York, where a 10,000-pound beam is the central part of a park renamed Memorial Park in the small town of Clarence Center. And right in front of my old headquarters at Northern Command, where a piece of World Trade Center steel reminds everybody who walks into that headquarters every day of what the important work is that they're doing. The tributes live on in ships like USS New York, whose bow was constructed using 7.5 tons of this steel that returns home to the home port of New York City this weekend. And she will soon be joined in the fleet by USS Arlington and USS Somerset, which will incorporate materials salvaged from those two sites as well. Yet while the World Trade Center steel dispersed across our nation serves as an important symbol of the steel of American resolve and resilience, the effort we celebrate today brings back together the American spirit of family, togetherness, and patriotism. You see, woven into each of the pieces of this wonderful flag lies a story as unique as the community from which it came. From people like tornado victims in Greensburg, Kansas, who began the effort in their own community while their own community was being rebuilt. Children and soldiers from Fort Hood, military families at Offutt Air Force Base, veterans at a VA hospital in Illinois, and many, many other places. And now, members of the Pentagon family will have their chance to add a stitch to this flag. Collectively, these stories and these pieces will restore a flag and will continue to restore hope for so many who lost someone on that awful day. So, Jeff, thank you for bringing this lasting symbol of American spirit and American steel right here to the Pentagon. And thanks to all of you gathered here for what you do each and every day on behalf of our great nation. And now it's my very great honor and privilege this afternoon to welcome our Secretary of Defense, a great American patriot like many of you standing in the audience today, to share a few words with us. Ladies and gentlemen, the Honorable Leon Panetta. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Sandy. Good afternoon. And I can't tell you what a great privilege it is to have the opportunity to participate in marking this date and in paying tribute to this great flag that we have before us. And I want to appreciate all of you coming out and being able to stand in the rain. We had hoped that the sun would come out by now. God knows we sure deserve it after these last few days. As an intelligence officer, I've learned never to rely on the weatherman for any kind of intelligence in this town. So, but I thank you for your presence. The warmth of your presence is enough right now. This weekend, as we all know, the entire nation comes together to remember what happened on that tragic day when the worst act of terrorism was made against the United States. And nearly 3,000 lives, innocent lives, were lost in New York, in that field in Pennsylvania, and here at the Pentagon. September 11th, 2001 will forever be a defining moment for all Americans. It's a day when we were attacked, by a vicious hatred aimed squarely at the values that we stand for as a nation. They wanted to weaken us, but instead they strengthened America. They unified us in the face of that attack. In the decades since, we have answered the enemy by showing our American character, by fighting back, by acting justly, decisively, relentlessly against threats to our citizens, to our nation, and to our freedom. For the Pentagon family, the events of that morning will never be forgotten. Today we come together as a family, as a community, to take some time out of our working day just to reaffirm that commitment to remember our fallen friends and our fallen colleagues. In gathering here, we pay tribute to those we lost. We recall the acts of heroism and courage that saved lives that day. And we honor the brave men and women of our military who have paid the ultimate price to protect our country and our freedom during this decade of war. We also have the opportunity, as part of this ceremony, to contribute to the restoration of this national 9/11 flag, which will forever stand as a monument to the strength of the American people. Though the gaping hole in this building has long been repaired, there remains a gaping hole in our hearts. We still feel deeply the loss of 184 people who perished here that morning. 59 men, women, children aboard Flight 77, and 125 workers here at the Pentagon, from the Army, the DIA, the Navy, and the OSD. Those men and women represent the full spectrum of our community: civil servants, contractors, military personnel. They were innocent men and women who shared a common dedication to serving our nation and who lost their lives because of that dedication. We will always grieve over those taken from us so violently. But we do so with the knowledge that had it not been for the heroic actions of many that day here at the Pentagon, the human toll would have been far worse. I had a chance this morning to attend a breakfast of those first responders who came here to the Pentagon that terrible morning. There will never be a full accounting of the acts of personal courage and heroism that took place. But out of that tragedy came inspiration. Men and women who dragged colleagues to safety from the horrible fire that consumed that part of this building. Men and women who dragged injured colleagues to safety. Individuals who ran towards the fire, not away from it, but towards the fire, in an effort to try to help their colleagues and their friends. And those who volunteered to provide medical assistance to the injured and comfort to the survivors. Also deserving of our thanks, our appreciation, our recognition are those who made sure that the Pentagon kept functioning that day, despite the shock and the damage of this unprecedented attack. The staff of the National Military Command, working at their center, continued to operate, continued to work closely without missing a step, ensuring that we had the continued ability of our military to respond to the threats that were out there and to these attacks. The skill and ingenuity of the building's engineering, maintenance staffs that kept crucial parts of our infrastructure functioning. And most of the building open for business the morning of September 12th, even as firefighters continued to battle the blaze and conduct a search and rescue operation. It should surprise no one that the men and women of the Department of Defense were more than equal to the tasks they faced that day, and in the weeks and months and years since. On September 11th, this building was transformed into a battlefield. But we drew resolve from that tragedy and a determination to take the battle to our enemies. 10 years later, we are a stronger nation. And at the core of that strength is that generation of Americans who have stepped forward to serve in uniform. Men and women who were determined to fight for the safety and for the freedom of the American people. They have put their lives on the line. And more than 6,200 have paid the ultimate price to defend this country. Because of their sacrifices, because of their relentless pressure that they brought to bear against our enemies, the American people are safer. And just as importantly, the terrorist who provoked that horrible attack on 9/11 has met his just end. One of my proudest moments in 40 years of having been in this town in various capacities. But one of my proudest moments was as CIA director, being able to work on the operation with some of our finest intelligence officers, working with some of our finest special forces teams, to be able to make a very clear point to our country and to the world that nobody attacks this country and gets away with it. We dealt al-Qaeda a major blow with the operation that took down bin Laden. But please make no mistake. Make no mistake. Violent extremism remains a deadly threat. We are dealing with their threats as we speak. Terrorists are determined to attack this country. We must never stop being vigilant We must never stop keeping the pressure on. We must never stop fighting to protect the safety of this country. We must never stop until we have been able to ensure that terrorists have no place to hide and that they no longer represent a threat to this country. As we mark this 10th anniversary of 9/11, we, the men and women of the Department of Defense, renew our pledge that was made the day of that attack, and a pledge that we have continued over the last 10 years. And today we renew that pledge, that we will always keep in our hearts the sacrifices of those who gave their lives for this country on 9/11 and during a decade of war. They did not die in vain. In fact, we remember their sacrifice as we continue the fight to make sure that this country is protected, to make sure that this country is kept safe, and most importantly, to fulfill the American dream of giving our children a safer and better life for the future. Thank you all for your commitment to this fight. Thank you all for your dedication. Thank you all for your patriotism and for the work that you do every day to protect the United States of America. God bless you, and God bless this country.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. It's now my privilege to introduce the founder of the New York Says Thank You Foundation. It's the largest 9/11 focused volunteer organization in the country. He was selected as a CNN Hero of 2011, and he's here today with the foundation's National 9/11 Flag Tour. I present to you Mr. Jeff Parness. Sir?
Secretary Panetta, Admiral Winterfeld. And the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. In the days following September 11th, 2001, a 30-foot American flag hung dangling, torn, and tattered from 90 West Street, the building directly south from where the World Trade Center once stood. As the days went by, the white stripes turned gray from the smoke at Ground Zero. As the weeks went by, the flag was shredded as it flew across the scaffolding that was heavily damaged in the collapse of the South Tower. In late October 2001, Charlie Vichers, the construction superintendent for the cleanup at Ground Zero, sent a crew up the scaffolding to rescue the remains of the tattered American flag. Charlie's original intention was to have the flag honorably retired, as he would any American flag torn or tattered. 7 years later, Charlie still had the pieces of the flag with him at his house in Pennsylvania. And on the 9/11 anniversary 2008, when our foundation, New York Says Thank You, went to help rebuild the town of Greensburg, Kansas, Charlie brought the pieces of the flag with him. As our volunteers were helping to rebuild Greensburg, Kansas, all the little old ladies at the Senior Citizen Center in Greensburg, Kansas, stitched this flag back together. And where pieces of the original flag were missing, they sewed in American flags that had survived the Greensburg, Kansas tornado. So they literally stitched together our history, what was destroyed in the aftermath of 9/11 in New York, being brought back to life 7 years later by folks in a small town in Kansas. That's what America is all about. We estimate close to 250,000 Americans have now seen, heard the story, or personally experienced the national 9/11 flag. At our first stitching ceremony on the 9th anniversary of 9/11 in Arkansas, Carlos Miranda, a Vietnam veteran who lost his son in Iraq, came with his son's medals, and he asked, "Is it okay if I put my son's medals on the flag so he could stitch with me?" September 14th in Montclair, New Jersey, a 10-year-old girl who has no visual memory of what her father looked like put a stitch in the flag in the New Jersey patch and looked at me and said, "The stitch that I put in, is it permanent or are you going to take it out?" I said, "No, it's going to be there forever." In Missouri, at a veterans group, a woman broke down in tears and she said, "When you see all these stitches, you see nothing but pure love." The Texas patch was sewed by school children and soldiers who survived the shooting at Fort Hood, Texas. The Hawaii patch was sewn by World War II veterans on the deck of the USS Missouri in Pearl Harbor on Pearl Harbor Day. On January 13th, this flag flew at the funeral of Christina Taylor Greene, the 9-year-old girl born on 9/11 who was killed in the Tucson shooting. The very next morning, the family of Martin Luther King Jr. stitched the Georgia patch at the King Center in Atlanta. On February 12th, President Lincoln's birthday, a small piece of the flag that Abraham Lincoln was laid on when he was shot in Ford's Theater and that he bled to, a small piece that fell off the Lincoln flag, was stitched into the fabric of the National 9/11 flag. So as you all get to see on the bottom right corner of the blue field where the blue and the red and the white meet, there's a small white patch with blue threads. The blue threads came from the flag that cradled President Lincoln as he lay dying. At the Kennedy Space Center, members of our space program and an 11-week-old child from Michigan stitched the Florida patch. Survivors at Columbine, survivors at the Oklahoma City National Memorial, firefighters who braved their lives in Katrina and Slidell, Louisiana, all stitched this flag. In New Mexico, in Gallup, Navajo code talkers stitched the New Mexico patch. In July, we stitched this flag with 20 members of Congress on Capitol Hill, and at the end of the day, we took the flag to the steps of the Capitol and sang "God Bless America." And last month, in August, we stitched the South Dakota patch at the base of Mount Rushmore, and the South Dakota patch was made up of the retired American flag that flew at Mount Rushmore on 9/11. There are so many stories. Our goal was to make this flag whole again by the 10th year anniversary of 9/11, at which point it's going to become part of the permanent collection of the National 9/11 Memorial Museum being built at the World Trade Center site. And our foundation's hope and our prayer has been that for generations to come, this flag does not just tell the story about what happened on 9/11, but it tells the story about what happened on 9/12. When Americans came together to help each other recover and to heal. And that compassion and that resilience and that volunteer spirit will be the ultimate legacy of the restoration of the National 9/11 flag. Now, Carolyn Dieters from Iowa, who's traveled around the country helping to stitch this flag and repair it, is going to kill me for what I'm about to say. We have to leave in an hour to go to Joplin, Missouri, because we decided to go to Joplin on the 10th anniversary of 9/11 to remind people that 9/11 didn't just happen in New York or at the Pentagon or in a field in Pennsylvania. 9/11 happened in America. And just like folks from Joplin, Missouri were there for us, we want to be there with them. So we're going to stitch for about an hour, and with your permission, at another time, we would love to bring the flag back, because I realize it doesn't end with the 10th year anniversary. The healing process never ends. And we would love everybody who works and who's dedicated their life to this country and this building to have the opportunity to stitch. With that, Secretary Panetta, Admiral Winfield, we'd be honored if you'd come place the first 2 stitches in the Pentagon patch of the National 9/11 flag.
Ladies and gentlemen, upon the departure of the Secretary and the Vice Chairman, that will conclude the official portion of today's observance. Upon their departure, I invite you to line up to also participate in putting stitches into the Pentagon patch of the Foundation's National 911 flag. Thank you very much for joining us here today. Thank you for all you've done for this nation. Thank you for what you've done for each other. God bless America.